Welcome to Municipal Affairs. This past month, Canada's capital was the center of attention for local governments from across the country. More than 2,000 municipal leaders gathered in Ottawa, Ontario for the annual Federation of Canadian Municipalities trade show and convention, a landmark event that brings together communities of all sizes to share ideas, elevate concerns, and help shape the national conversation on municipal priorities. The agenda was full and forward looking, touching on everything from bail reform and calls for stable, predictable federal funding to mental health and addiction and the growing concerns of misinformation in our digital age. Among those in attendance were delegations from Western and Northern Canada, regions facing their own unique challenges but united in a desire to bring those issues to the national stage. Now, we spoke with several presidents of the municipal associations from the regions to hear what they took away from this year's FCM convention and what comes next for the provinces and territories. We bring the first interview with Trish Mandewo, president of the Union of British Columbia Municipalities. She joined us to talk about the importance of BC's presidents at FCM, the ongoing concerns around Bill 15 in British Columbia, and how her team plans to carry momentum from Ottawa back to British Columbia. President Mandewo, thank you so much for sitting down with me at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. As president of the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, why is it important for UBCM to be here at FCM in Ottawa this week?
So you might already know that every province has an association of local governments. We all work individually within our provinces. So when we come to FCM, it's actually a space for us to get together and not only network, but also to share knowledge and to have that collective voice. We also sit at the board for FCM as the associations. So we are constantly sharing knowledge. But at the convention, it's even a bigger stage for us to connect even further.
So what are you connecting on as president of your organization? You're meeting with other presidents of PTAs across. You're meeting with Rebecca Bligh, the president of FCM. What are the common themes that you're hearing that impact BC that might impact, say, Saskatchewan or Alberta or New Brunswick? What are the common themes that you're hearing?
Yeah, so the common themes so far has been housing. But the biggest one that I'm hearing is the undermining of local governments, where you have provincial governments that are making decisions and more eroding the power from local governments, even though we are the ones that are closest to the people. And I often say, federal government is all the money, if that's when they are not in deficit. As well as provincial governments, they've got all the power, but local governments have all the problems. And I'll also add that we have all the solutions as well, right? So yes, it's very critical for us to come together and share what those problems are, what the solutions are, and so we can also collectively advocate because we are stronger together.
We are stronger together, but in BC, I was just on a press conference that you and the First Nations of British Columbia put together around Bill 15. Mm-hmm. You talk about that undermining of municipal responsibilities. Mm-hmm. When you're here at a conference like FCM, are you hearing other municipal jurisdictions, whether it be different provinces, going through similar issues around, say, their own type of Bill 15 in their own jurisdictions, or is that unique within the BC borders?
Oh no, it's definitely not unique because Ontario is actually going through the same thing. And when we say undermining, we are actually being nice. The right word is power grab.
You're actually saying a power grab.
I'm saying it is a power grab. Let's call it what it is. Right? And if you listened to my messages or my interviews in BC, my argument was on behalf of our members, the province has so many efficiencies that they need to work on themselves. But now suddenly they want to come and, override us and take more power, even though they're not doing what they're doing great. Why not work together? Let's collaborate because we are stronger together. Even within the different levels of government, we are stronger together. Let's collaborate. Let's do what's best for our communities. But you don't do so by coming and just grabbing more power.
I know we're supposed to be talking about FCM, but I need to ask this question. Are you optimistic that Bill 15 will be overturned, or there will be a solution that will be beneficial to First Nations, to municipalities in the near future with the NDP government, with David Eby?
Optimistic? I would say no. You know why? Because the way that we all went to the provincial government, to the BC government, and shared our discontent or our problems that we saw with Bill 15, with all those people giving the feedback, I would have said they would have seen that and they would have listened and they would have either paused and go back to consult, but they didn't do that. They went forward with it. So to me, it seems like I don't think there's a willingness from their side to reverse it or to do anything, because they did have an opportunity to not pass it in a rush, right? So I'm not optimistic, but I do know that I'm hearing from the First Nations that they are going to find other ways.
So what's next? What do you do now? Because I think the spring session has risen for the summer, so that means they're probably not going to be back in until after your UBCM conference in Victoria later on this year. What do you have to do?
So for us, though, for local governments, as you know, they call us the little creature of the province, right?
Which is the worst thing to say to a municipal
we went to our father or our big brother, and we said, listen to us, and they didn't listen. And that's where it ends, really, because we don't have any other powers. The only thing that we hope for is for the other levels of government to listen when we are bringing forward concerns, to listen to us. But if they don't, really, we have no ammunition. There's nothing that we can do.
Getting back to the FCM for a few seconds, if you don't mind. You talk about housing. I'm hearing about mental health and addiction.
Oh yes, yeah. We went on a tangent. I didn't get to listen
back
all of
to
them.
the original conversation. When you're here at FCM, whether it be here in Ottawa, in Calgary, up in Edmonton, wherever it is, how do you get those networking sessions where you get those common grounds, that stronger together? Oh, what's working in this community couldn't work in British Columbia. How do you get those common issues, find common solutions, and bring them to common reality to make sure that the people of British Columbia get something from all the municipal leaders from BC attending a conference like this?
So I'll tell you what my council does. So we all come and we look at the sessions that we think are going to benefit our community, and we go to our different sessions, and I take my notes, and if it's slides, I'll take my the slides, and when I go back, I actually report to council to say I went to this session. For example, I went to the nightlife one, because we're going to be building, our community Coquitlam is growing, and eventually we're going to be looking to have a nightlife as well. So I wanted to hear some of the best practices that Ottawa, has. I don't want to do the same mistakes that they did. So I went to that session. I also went to the homelessness session, right? Because we are having problems just like other communities. So we're trying to find if other communities have found ways to deal with this so that we can either avoid the mistakes or copy the things that they're doing right, so that we can just do the best for the people in our communities.
A very political question, but I feel like you and I are friends now, and I can ask you a very political question. But what is the benefit of UBCM being part of an organization like FCM?
We are stronger together, right? FCM is us. FCM wouldn't exist without local governments. So FCM is made up of all the individual local governments, and I would argue that it would be difficult to be in touch with every single member. So by having the associations in every province, now they have a direct line to a local organization that has the same members at the base, right? So it's actually an effective way of communication to where now they can communicate directly, or they can communicate through us as area associations, and the goal is to make sure that the messages get to the members and that we really do the best that we can for our communities.
So my final question, and this is more of a
final.
If you will learn, if you have not learned already, I ask a lot of final questions. Okay. But this is my final question because it's more of a personal one. You're coming up to the end of your term as a two-term president of the UBCM. President, how was it? Did you enjoy your time as president of your organization? Because I know you still got a summer, but September's right around the corner. Have you made the changes you've wanted to in the position you've been in for the last 2 years?
Yeah, so I wouldn't call them changes, but as much as, for me, I measure success as did I represent the members well. And for that, I'll say I left no stone unturned. I represented the members of British Columbia, small, medium, large, and everything in between. And I listened to their voices, and I advocated as hard as I could. And I think that is a measure of success in this position. And could more be done? I'm sure. But you probably know, from the day that I got elected as president 2 years ago, I think it was literally maybe 2 weeks, we got a slew of legislation, Bill 44, 45, 46, 47, right? And I had to immediately go to the members and say, what are your feelings about this? What are you feeling? So that I can be able to speak for them. And that hit the road running. And I don't think it has really stopped for the whole time.
It does not sound like it stopped. But I want to thank you so much, President Mandewo, for sitting down with me. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in Victoria this year.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for being our voice.
Next, we caught up with Tyler Gandam, president of Alberta Municipalities. He shared why Alberta has such a strong showing this year at the convention, what his recent meeting with the new Minister of Municipal Affairs in the province of Alberta, Dan Williams, meant for local leaders, and what the role FCM continues to play for his province of Alberta. President Gandam, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting about Alberta Municipalities' perspective when coming to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. From your perspective, why is it important for AB Munis to be here in Ottawa at the FCM?
I think just having a presence here with our members. I know over the last 8 years or 10 years that I've been coming to FCM, Alberta has always had probably the largest contingency of people that come to this conference across the country. And so I think it's important to know that our members feel supported here as well. Alberta Munis had a booth set up here, doing some networking and making sure that our members feel like they're supported, even when they're not in Alberta. So while that's really good, it comes down to the networking again. We hear and talk to our members a lot, but sometimes hearing and maybe sharing some of the best practices with other members of councils from across the country helps you understand that maybe what you've got going on isn't the worst thing in the world because you're not the only one, or you learn some of the new best practices or different best practices that you might be able to take home to your communities or to your province.
Are you finding those similarities unique, like homelessness, encampments, mental health and addiction, bail reform, or are you finding more granular, individual, unique issues?
No, I think you could go top 5 and say lack of housing, homelessness, mental health, addictions, healthcare, transportation, all of the things that we're dealing with across the country is very much what we're dealing with in Alberta. So to be able to hear what they're working on or maybe trying some newer innovative ways on how having to deal with it works well for us, and it gives us some stuff to take back to our members.
Alberta Municipalities, and I say that across the province of Alberta, is usually one of the top delegate attendees here at FCM. What does that say to you as president that municipal leaders want to be part of this conversation at that federal level?
It's fantastic, and it shows the testament of how much work our members, our councillors, our administration is doing and trying to work on being better for their communities too. Coming across the country when it was in Halifax or Fredericton, and now we're in Ottawa, Calgary last year, but we get the opportunity to have it in Edmonton next year. So
a lot easier for us to get back and forth to our houses.
It is, but it's fantastic to be able to network with people from across the country because across the country we're dealing with those same issues, and so sometimes it's just to commiserate and make sure you feel like you're not alone.
Is it just that, though, or do you try to find solutions here as well? Because when I speak to delegates, it's what's the best practice? Mm-hmm. What are you doing in your community that might work well in, say, Leduc or in Rocky Mountain House? What is it about finding the solution part of the equation that is beneficial to do this in person rather than virtually?
Yeah, and that's the important part too, right? You can learn from somebody else's mistakes so that you aren't going through the same thing. I've handed out my card a number of times for people who are asking how Wetaskiwin is dealing with homelessness, or what is Alberta Municipalities doing to support their members. I constantly get feedback that our conference, our convention is fantastic. It's amazing. And do I get a chance to go to other provincial conferences and conventions? And I do, luckily. And so it's great to see what other associations are doing, and to be able to take back some of the good things that are happening across the country.
We are living in, well, we're not living, but we're at the convention where bail reform, crime, mental health and addiction is taking front and center. I want to specifically talk about the bail reform piece because I've spoken to many of your members and that is a big concern for them. Are you happy that this is finally being talked about in an open setting? Because in Calgary, it wasn't really discussed that much. And here in Ottawa, it seems to be the hot topic. The Prime Minister came in yesterday and gave his address to the delegates, and he did talk about housing, bail reform, resources to market. Are you optimistic that the issues that your members are talking about are finally being addressed at the national stage?
I sure hope so. That's one of the things with prolific offenders. I understand that it's not a crime to be poor, but at the same time, communities shouldn't have to live in fear or not being comfortable in their own homes, because we do have a problem with homelessness, mental health, addictions, and the crime that goes along with that. So would love to see what that's going to look like, because we definitely need some changes happening there too. The revolving door isn't working.
The federal government has changed. Well, the party hasn't changed, but the guy at the top has changed. He spoke at the conference day one. What do you hope the relationship between the federal government and Alberta municipalities will be like heading forward?
I think a lot of that work is going to come through FCM. And so as the president of Alberta Municipalities, I also sit on the FCM board. So being able to take our concerns from Alberta and have it on the national stage is going to be beneficial. I think we're going to have the opportunity to utilize that position to have more contact with the federal government. And while we have different municipal, provincial issues going on in Alberta, a lot of what the federal government does has an impact on what we receive in Alberta, not just Wetaskiwin. And I think it's really important that we have that opportunity to have the conversations with the federal government.
So what's next? You go back to Alberta in a few days, and what do you take back from FCM to ensure that the conversations, the advocacy work, the networking doesn't end once you step on the plane to go back to Wetaskiwin?
Getting back and meeting with my board, letting them know what I learned here, and I do the same thing for my city.
Your board's here from gather. There's a few of them.
Yeah, for sure. Which is again showing the importance of being able to come to these conferences outside of our province. But it's our work. It's understanding what's going on across the country. And when we do we'll have our fall convention coming up. We've got 4 dates for our summer Municipal Leaders Caucus coming up. We're going to be able to share some of what we've learned and the experiences that we've had here with our members, and maybe have some answers for them when they come to us and say that they're having trouble with something going on in their community.
This next question might be a little timestamp by the time this goes to air, but northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, and even central Alberta, some communities have been evacuated. Swan Hills, particularly in Alberta. As Alberta Municipality President, you're seeing this unfold. Are you in contact with the Mayor of Swan Hills to ensure everyone's safe, that everyone is out, that any help that Alberta municipalities can rely or give to the people of Swan Hills or the people that are being evacuated is there?
Yeah. So I know Trina Jones has reached out to Swan Hills, and regularly our board members are reaching out to the towns, the villages, and the cities that are affected with some of the natural disasters that have been going on over the last couple of years. So it is important for them to know that Alberta Municipalities has their back, and if there are things that we're able to do to help them, we're ready and willing, always willing to help out where we can. I've seen some other posts from neighboring municipalities saying what's available for those residents to bring trailers, what's available in their community for resources. And so people are just coming together, and it happens so naturally. It's unfortunate that we've had so many fires, so many reasons to be evacuated over the last few years, but you're really seeing a province come together and making sure that they're helping their neighboring communities with whatever they can, and that's what we're seeing as well.
Final question on this, and that is, what is the benefit of Alberta Municipalities' participation at FCM that you couldn't do on your own?
I think access to the federal government, the relationships that have been built through FCM, their administration, previous board members, all of that stuff gets passed along. We do advocacy days here in December, so we come and meet with a bunch of the MPs, different ministers, hearing the party leaders here, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, our Deputy Leader, Melissa Landsman, being able to come in here, have the opportunity to talk to them and hear what their priorities are, I think is important, because again, just because we're dealing with the municipal and provincial issues in Alberta doesn't mean that there is no federal impact when legislation is changed.
Mayor Gandam, thanks for chatting with me. For a quick question, I know that you, as part of Alberta Municipalities, but also as the City Mayor's Caucus in Alberta, just recently met with the new Minister of Municipal Affairs, Dan Williams. What was that meeting like?
It was good. We actually had Premier Danielle Smith attend virtually. A couple other MLAs.
Former McIver minister as well.
Minister McIver stopped by to say thanks. He said he
Speaker
still had
McIver now.
still had it in his calendar, so he made sure on his way home from Edmonton he stopped by and said hi. Got a standing ovation. We thanked him for all of his hard work that he had done for us, and we made ourselves available through Mid-City Mayors to Minister Williams, in that when he needs a resource or he needs somebody to reach out and talk to about maybe what might work, what might not work, is equally as important as having a strong relationship. So the fact that he took the time to come there and spend the afternoon with our caucus was fantastic.
Did you get a commitment to have a meeting?
He actually committed to having time for everybody.
Wow.
So yeah, understanding that they're done now potentially done now. We'll be reaching out to his office and setting up that meeting. I'm looking forward to having a very similar relationship as I did with Minister McIver. Again, we don't always have to agree, but I do appreciate the fact that he always had time for me. From what I'm hearing from Minister Williams is he's offering the same thing. He offered a room of 24 mayors and a bunch of administrators, saying whoever wants my phone number can have my phone number. So I think he's going to be very accessible, and I think he'll be a good fit for municipalities and the members of council who will be serving with them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tyler.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Now, with over 50 delegates in attendance from across the Prairie Province of Saskatchewan, we sat down with Randy Goulden, president of the Saskatchewan Urban Municipalities Association. She shared her thoughts on this year's event and the ongoing concerns around wildfires in northern Saskatchewan that were a top of mind for many in her delegation. President Goulden, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting. I've got to start with a simple question. You are here at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on the last day. Why is it important for SUMA to be at a convention like this?
Well, it's phenomenal, the connections that we have, the work that we can talk about, looking at how SUMA can be involved in a national perspective. Because as we know, Saskatchewan is not alone in this country. There are other provinces and territories, and we only are, as the theme says, stronger together if we all offer out a hand to help out whenever we can.
One of the big things that happens at these events and even at SUMA is that networking sessions where off the side of the hallway people are talking. Are you hearing the same conversations in your networking sessions of same challenges, concerns that municipalities in Saskatchewan are dealing with, that every municipality across Canada is dealing with? Or, as the mayor of Whitehorse told me, are you feeling like an island, that your issues are so unique that it's only Saskatchewan residents dealing with it?
Well, you always hear individual challenges that they're seeing, but I can put it almost in three large buckets, and that's infrastructure, it's revenue sharing, and it's public safety. So you can usually put them into those three big buckets that we're all advocating for. And absolutely they're individual things. I could bring some things from my community that might be, very individual. But when we sit down and talk, there's many things that are in common. What I find is perhaps some of the challenges are the different amount of zeros that would be included in the budget lines to deal with them.
You're the second person to tell me that today. There must be a common theme here. I want to turn to a little bit more of a serious conversation, if you don't mind, and particularly what's going on in northern Saskatchewan as we're talking. Wildfires are forcing the evacuation of communities. They're getting closer to communities. As president, your province is rallying around the people who are being evacuated. What does that tell you as a president of the municipal organization about the people of Saskatchewan?
Well, it just confirms what we already know. We're all good neighbors. Does not matter where we are in the province, and we all rally around for people that are in need, communities that are in need. And we've heard from so many, like, what can we do to help? We're a phone call away. And I know from SUMA's perspective, I've let everyone know if they need anything, just let us know. Let Jean-Marc know at our SUMA office, because we've all had issues in our communities, but these wildfires, they're taking people's away from their homes, their businesses. This is not going to be something that can be, helped and mediated over the very short term. This is going to be long term. So right now we are all offering help, but that doesn't come for just today. That's in the future.
There seems to be a lot of chat at this convention about the effects of wildfires. We saw what happened in Jasper last year. We're seeing what happens in Creighton, Saskatchewan, Flin Flon, Manitoba. Environmental concerns, climate change has got to be top of mind for a lot of people at this convention. Have you heard a lot of conversation around that? I
have, and I think one thing I want to say, what has been consistent in all of that is the support for these communities, but the leadership that we have seen from mayors and councillors and community staff. I hearken back to Jasper, a community that our family has been very joyful in for many years. We're skiers and we love the mountain there, and I watched with my heart sinking with Mayor Ireland from Jasper and what he had to deal with. And now, we're dealing with the mayors in our own province having to deal with these things. And yes, we have to do something about that. And we really have to work hard on the mitigation. We have to work hard on making our communities safe and safer on things that we need to do, including the trees we're going to be planting. I mean, so many things have come to light in the last few years, and we can't sit back and say, well, this will never happen to Yorkton, Saskatchewan, because maybe we won't have the forest fires, but back in the early 2010, 2014, we have no river in Saskatchewan. We're not close to any large body of water, and we flooded out 4 years, first in 2010 and then in 4 years later in 2014. So we can't say that this may not happen. We have to mitigate for what might happen.
So going back to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention for a few minutes, thank you for allowing me to divulge there for a second. How do you ensure that the work, the advocacy, the networking that you took away from this convention doesn't end the moment you step on that plane to head back to Saskatchewan? Because the advocacy work can't stop the moment you get back to Saskatchewan. It needs to continue. What do you ensure you do?
Well, I think what I am very fortunate is I'm on the board of directors and on the executive committee currently, and I see this, but then I know our members see it, and sometimes you go, oh my gosh, it's another email from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. What's this about? But it's an opportunity to contribute and be a part of. And I just hearken back to the advocacy done on behalf of municipalities for the federal election. The FCM Election Readiness Committee, even though the name says election readiness, they work all the time in between, getting our advocacy issues to our members, getting out the way to advocate, getting out the tools and the toolboxes that everybody needs, and making everyone prepared that it's just an email to their MPs or a letter to their local media, or help doing interviews like the ones you do, Chris. So it's just providing support to our hometowns and our RMs and our counties on how we can all advocate, because it's not just one voice that's going to make a change.
So what happens, and this is the question that's a little bit more political in nature, if you don't mind, because there might be some people who are watching this or listening to this going, oh, it's just a bunch of politicians getting together in Ottawa and doing what they do on public dime. What do you say to residents of Saskatchewan of why it's important for Saskatchewan to be at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities? What do you get from the FCM that you can't do by yourself?
Well, I think it's the support we get. It's the advocacy support we get, but the information we get. I sat in several different presentations around the Green Municipal Funds and got to see firsthand where we've gone with those funding, and it's gone into communities of all sizes, all over Saskatchewan, all over Canada, and in the territories. And that was evident here. They were able to meet the people that they can work with and get support and help with applying for those funds. So that's just one. But I think the other thing is it's talking to the councillors and mayors from across this country. And I've heard this many times. You know, you come here and you've got challenges in your hometown about different things, budgeting, different, corrections and public safety. And then you come here and you talk with someone, and there may be some best practices shared, but it's also the awareness that you're not alone. You've got a phone call to make. You can call someone, and I know I've been accompanied here with our Mayor Aaron Keenley, and Councillor Dustin Breers, both first-time attendees, and they can't wait to get home and talk with our council and our administration about what they've learned and how they can put it to use. So I would suggest to anybody watching or hearing this, give them a call too and hear firsthand from first-timers.
And next year it's a little bit closer to home for you. You just have to drive a highway down to Edmonton.
Yeah.
But President Goulden, I'm always appreciative of your time. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I feel like this is not the last conversation you and I will ever have, but thank you so much.
I can't wait to welcome you back to Yorkton, because it's always a pleasure having you there.
We also spoke with Kathy Valentino, president of the Association of Manitoba Municipalities, and now, as of this convention, the newly appointed second vice president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Valentino reflected on the impact of the wildfires near Lynn Lake and Flin Flon in our discussion, and how that has informed her growing voice at the national level. President Valentino, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting at the last day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. As the president of AMM, why is it important for AMM and Manitoba municipalities to be at a convention like this?
A couple of reasons. You know, every chance you get to network with the rest of Canadian municipalities around you, you gather more information on what municipalities are doing, and you create relationships that you end up leaning on. So the more that we can gather and build relationships, the stronger than Manitoba municipalities can be, and learn new ideas and then move those ideas forward.
I gotta broach the subject, if you don't mind, for a second, because everyone's thoughts and prayers are with the people of Manitoba this week as we celebrate municipalities, but we're also worried about municipalities, especially Flin Flon, Lynn Lake. As president of AMM, as a northern municipal leader, you're getting the reports that everyone else is getting. Take me through what you're feeling right now, if you don't mind.
Exhaustion is what we're feeling, and I think I said earlier today, you come to these conferences to have a really good time and stay out late and have fun, and we've been more so staying up late, having calls and messages and texts and phone calls and stuff, and really not sleeping very good. So exhaustion would be right up there, but I can tell you, unfortunately, you learn a lot when you go through crisis situations, and I thank you for your comment. Yeah, absolutely. Northern Manitoba is on fire, and we have some great concerns with the town of Lynn Lake and the city of Flin Flon and many of our Indigenous communities that surround us. So a couple of takeaways I can say from that is I've learned, even speaking with Gerald, who's the mayor of Lloydminster, who talk about creating relationships Canadian-wise, border cities and border towns, our premiers need to know that there needs to be a conversation if we're going to have interprovincial barriers a discussion into provincial barriers when it comes to emergencies or putting your province into a state of emergency. Border towns and communities need to be a part of that, because I live in Manitoba on my front step, you might be living in Saskatchewan on your front step. I'm evacuated, you're not. Causes a lot of confusion, I think, and makes it hard for municipal leaders in times of crisis. So I really hope that that can be something that we can get some conversations going. That's definitely something that needs to be discussed.
A lot of outpouring of support for the people of Flin Flon and Lynn Lake and other northern communities, First Nations. When you're here and you're speaking to delegates from across Alberta and Saskatchewan, which are going through relatively the same thing, there must be a sense of, I don't want to say brotherhood because it's the worst brotherhood to be part of, but there must be a sense that we're all in this together. No matter what happens in Lynn Lake or Flin Flon, the people of Alberta will support them. The people of Nova Scotia will support them. So it must give a little bit of a reassurance, even though we're seeing pictures on TV right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the theme of this conference at FCM couldn't be better, stronger together, better together. That's true because, like Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, we're all in this fight right now. And it doesn't really matter right now what province you live in. We need each other to talk and share and just to realize that this is really happening. And it's really happening earlier and earlier every year. And it's scary. And it's good to have connections and contacts through this, that's for sure.
I can imagine what you're going to be going home to, but I've got to ask a simple question about the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Convention. What do you take back from this convention to make sure that the advocacy work that you did here, the work that was started here, doesn't end the moment you get on the plane to get back to Winnipeg to fly up to Thompson?
Well, first off, I'm going to drive back to Thompson.
Okay.
Because I want to buy my bedding plants and garden stuff, so I brought my truck and I'm going to make that long ride home. So
for you it's nothing though. It's not a long ride.
I can do it. So a couple of takeaways. I think that, and I'm hoping that there's been more of a message about how important rural municipalities are in Canada's whole big picture. And for Manitoba, we're a little bit unique that we're the center of Canada, and we have really, one big city, Winnipeg, and of course the city of Brandon. But rural voices in rural Manitoba really matter, and that's important to us in Manitoba, and that's important when we advocate for Manitoba municipalities, that whatever federally government plans or projects or grant applications that they put out there, that there has to be a rural lens to them, and that's a real part of our advocacy for Manitoba municipalities.
I want to turn to your role as second vice president now, because you're officially entering your supposed to be second vice president year, but due to the things that happened, they happened, and you've been second vice president for some time. You're losing Scott Pierce, but you're gaining a new member from Dorval, the mayor. Are you looking forward to the table officers and this new era of FCM as you enter into the great unknown with the Carney government?
I feel like we've already been in the big unknown since this all happened these last 12 months, but excuse me. Well, I think one of the things is I got to make my New Year's resolution to learn French, because that's going to matter now on the table officers, I think. But all joking aside, because of a bit of the chaos we've been living in with U.S. and even a Canadian federal election, we've all really got to know each other quickly and really stepped up. So ironically, we've built a really kind of close network because we had to, and that's a good thing. So I just think we're just continuing moving on as we have been, and it was a fast pace, and so I think that we'll just continue that, and that's good, that momentum. Unfortunately it's on the backs of U.S. tariffs, and we had to do all that, but yeah, it's going to be good. You
were relatively an unknown to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities as of Calgary last year, and you were a self-described unknown. Looking back on the last year, many municipal leaders might be going back to their community and say, is it worth it? Is it worth to be part of the organization of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities? As someone who's now not only active, but a table officer, do you feel like you get your worth from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, whether it be that advocacy, whether it be those meetings on the Hill? What do you get from being part of FCM that you're like, this is why we do it?
You're absolutely right. I was a complete unknown. I was not aware of FCM as in depth, I guess, as I do now. So do I think, yeah, I certainly do. After I see the work that FCM has done with the US tariffs and right away going to work for Canadian municipalities, absolutely. And I see now the opportunity that we have with a new Canadian government. Whatever the government of the day was, we were ready and did a lot of, pre-election work and meetings, and I think that it's a huge opportunity, and I think that you could see that over this conference the last few days. I was the moderator for the rural infrastructure agenda. Like, what do we want that to look like? What do we want to be able to offer to the federal government that we want to see in the next infrastructure funding program? So you can't do that if you're not at the table, and if you're not a part of FCM, you're not going to have a say. So we have to try and we have to speak up. That's our role, and it's a privilege to serve. And we have to do our best and try because we're being given this opportunity to serve. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth it.
President Valentino, it's always a pleasure. Our hearts are with you at this time right now, but I look forward to seeing you in Winnipeg. For a rural perspective, we turn to Cara Westerlund, president of the Rural Municipalities of Alberta. She spoke with us about the needs for rural communities and the role FCM can play in ensuring their voices are heard. President Westerlund, thank you so much for sitting down with me at the third day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. First off, what does RMA get from these conventions when they attend?
Well, obviously we participate in the plenaries and with the workshops and with the speakers, so there's that aspect. But I think a bigger piece for us and more of value is just the networking opportunity and the opportunity to speak one-on-one and get to know some of our rural counterparts from across the country, whether it's from BC all the way to PEI. It's a good opportunity. It's once a year when we can all get together and have some of those conversations. And I think the biggest thing for us that we're learning and the more conversations we're having is, some of the challenges and issues that we're facing in our province on the rural landscape actually are not too much different than what somebody in rural Quebec is facing. So it does provide that good opportunity for us to connect and have those very important conversations.
One of the big events here at this convention was the release of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Rural Report on the future of rural Canada. According to the press release, according to the press conference, the Rural Municipalities of Alberta did give some input into the report. Can you take me through the process of what you told the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on what the challenges and opportunities that lie in rural Canada and particularly rural Alberta?
So the report was just released this morning, and so far I've had a little bit of mixed reaction with what's in there. They did spend half a day interviewing myself and I think a few others from rural Alberta about our perspectives and the challenges that we're facing. A lot of the conversation was obviously around infrastructure. We talked about a little bit about the housing issue, and it was actually very broad subject that we touched on. So it's going to be interesting to see how that is received and how well it's going to go out. It was an interesting process to go through it. I'm happy that they did take the time to reach out and do that rural report. So time will tell to see how successful it will be or not.
One of the economic drivers of Alberta, in particular rural Alberta, and you and I have talked about this on lengthy occasions, is the oil and gas industry in rural Alberta. There's concern that I've heard, and you probably hear it from your members, that oil and gas does not get its due diligence when you're at conventions like FCM. Do you feel like this is the convention that a little bit is going to be changed and maybe oil and gas might be talked about a little bit more in the future, or are you a little bit pessimistic like some of your colleagues across rural Alberta?
I try to remain optimistic, but it is difficult. I've been here for 3 days, and I don't think unless one of us from rural Alberta brought it up, oil and gas and energy in general has not been brought up or talked about, which is interesting because we do have a new federal government in place, and we've heard the new Prime Minister repeatedly talk about energy and talk about oil and gas, and I need to look around the room right now because I'm going to, dare I say the word pipeline and not get jumped. There's still that level of negativity out here. But I was often joking. I was, out enjoying this beautiful city, and at a restaurant, and they had a fireplace going, and guess what's running? That natural gas. So I chuckled and said, I'm like, oh, I bet you Alberta is running your fireplace, and I got a little bit of a dirty look. So there's still some work to be done, and obviously a little bit disappointed that our energy sector isn't being more talked about here. And obviously we know there's some challenges on the oil and gas side, and we're very open to talking about them, but more importantly, finding the solutions to get over those hurdles that we face. I feel like people start talking about the negativity or some of the challenges we face, and they kind of start spinning their wheels in the mud. And I'm tired of that. We just pick the truck up and pick those tires up and then continue on and let them spin that way. So it is difficult. There is a large delegation here from Alberta, actually both urban and rural. And our need to get our energy and our resources out to market is not being talked about it the way that it should be.
I'm going to ask a very political question, but I feel like you're up for it. At this year's RMA convention, there was a resolution put forward around Federation of Canadian Municipalities. It failed, barely.
Barely.
Do you think FCM has heard rural Alberta's concerns after what you've just said?
I'm going to take a second to answer. Take a breath. I think they're trying. They still have a long ways to go to hit the mark. If you talk to people here from our province, particularly from Alberta and from rural Alberta, it's a mixed reaction. It's, in the past when I've come and where the support's been, it's been a very clear yes. It's still a mixed bag of emotions and support here from the rural side. I think there was an opportunity here to make rural Alberta, rural Canada heard. We talked about it. One of my board members, Josh Theree from Wetaskiwin County, said it perfectly. He said, we come to these things and all we hear about is the big cities and what the big city mayors are going on and what's going on in urban. We need to make it so uncomfortable that those urban and those big city mayors are going, why are we talking about rural Canada? Why are we talking about Brazeau County, and why are we talking about Mackenzie County? We need to shift the pendulum so far the other way that's what we hear back to feel like we're going to get anywhere. So it has been incredibly difficult. I'll probably get myself into trouble for saying this, but you know me, I'm pretty open. We have met with Parliament. We were on the Hill most of actually all day Thursday. And those were meetings that we arranged, not through FCM. It was done through us. We need to get in front of a few appointed people to get some of our messaging through, and we did that. We went out and did it on our own. That being said, I understand it is complex. FCM represents over 2,000 municipalities across the country, and it is difficult. Somebody always going to feel left out somewhere. But one thing that I'm hearing, it's not just rural Alberta, it's rural Canada is feeling a little bit like they've been left in the dust. And obviously, we are the engine of this country. Your energy needs don't come from downtown Ottawa. They don't come from downtown Toronto. They don't come from downtown Vancouver. It comes from my backyard. My kids' swing set's over an active pipeline. And like you talk about eating, breathing, where your energy comes from, it comes from my backyard. We talk about agriculture. We feed the world. We feed this country. And, forestry is another huge industry out there. I'm sorry, but you're not logging in downtown Toronto. You're logging in my backyard. We talk about natural disasters, and I understand floods hit the cities as we look out over, the beautiful canal here in front of us. And I understand that, they're going to get a bit of flooding here, but we have flooding that wipes out entire communities, not just
key infrastructure.
Absolutely. And our forestry industry is being decimated right now with wildfires because guess what? They can't get out there and do what they need to do because we've got being held up by government. It's so frustrating.
Are you? I know you're the eternal optimist in the room. You heard the Prime Minister speak, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Or you've listened to his speech. Melissa Lantsman was here. Gord Johns from the NDP. Elizabeth May. Are you optimistic that this government is not the government of Justin Trudeau? Because I was in that room and I saw conservatives, like rural conservatives, stand up and applaud the Prime Minister, what he was saying about pipelines or resources and housing. Are you still the continuous optimist in the sense that this government may be different than the past one?
You know what? I'll be blunt on this question. You've got there the time that the watch and the clock is ticking. If something substantially isn't done, I think in the next 6 to 8 months, you're going to be at a huge loss. We're at a pivotal point right now where the federal government has a chance to really put their money where their mouth is and make some of the changes. Talk is cheap. I want to see action. And we got to move. And like I said, 6 to 8 months. I maybe could squish me out for maybe 12 months. That's being me a little bit optimistic.
By January of next year, we're lost.
We're lost, and I don't want to think about what will happen. That in that 6 to 12 month, if we don't start moving, we already know we're having difficulty attracting investment, and we haven't even touched about tariffs and our issues going south of the border with our friends there. But we have a real pivotal moment right now where we can turn things around and not so be dependent on what's going on south of the border. We have a real opportunity. The biggest thing everybody was asking me, what can we do? You need to remove the tanker ban off the West Coast. You know what? It doesn't make sense to pipe our oil and gas through into Vancouver. We have another port up to the north in Prince Rupert. It's a deep water, deep well, or deep
it's
sea.
Deeper than Vancouver.
And it makes sense to go through up there because you know what? If you actually talk to northern BC, a lot of those communities are a lot like my communities. And in rural BC and rural Alberta, we have a lot of similarities. There's a lot of oil and gas activity going up in the northern part of that province. So let's remove those regulations stopping us from getting our products to market. And let's honestly put our money where our mouth is and let's get moving. Talk is cheap at this point, and
one of the big things that Mark Carney and even this convention have been talking about over the last week is bail reform. Mm-hmm. I know that is important to rural Canadians,
Absolutely.
Rural Albertans. What specifically are you looking for around bail reform to get the repeat offenders off the street so your communities, your member communities of RMA feel safe at the end of the day?
You look at it and we all talk about the revolving door and the issues that we're facing there, and it's the repeat offenders. And let's be real. We need to keep them off the street. Let's, again, put our money where our mouths are and keep them off the street. We were just talking about it, and I was talking with Tim Tierney, first vice president with FCM. And we had a police officer in Vancouver that was doused in a chemical and lit on fire. And, why is the rest of the country not on fire about this? That individual was wanted on 10 warrants and 10 violent and very serious warrants. And he was out there and was allowed to do that. Like, there is something wrong. You talk to the local detachment in my area, we're roughly about 8,000 people. And, I was talking with our staff sergeant. They arrested an individual for break and enter 4 times in 24 hours until finally they kept him in jail after the 4th attempt in less than 24 hours. This is the issues I'm talking about. They're incredibly real. We're not just sitting here saying, oh, things need to change. We have the examples. We're living the examples every single day. Something has to change. And you know what, I joke, but jokingly but not jokingly, I often say a JP or a judge wants to release this person, absolutely. Then they stay at your house and you're responsible for looking after them because you seem to think it's fit to put them back on the street again. And we got to start holding people accountable, especially on this side. We talk about in our province, and Chris, you're no stranger to this, I'm even wearing my button here today. I love the RCMP. Depending on who you talk to in government and in our province, they seem to think we have an RCMP problem, but I will be loud and clear. We do not have an RCMP problem in our province or in this country. We have a judicial problem. And you know what? You can put a police officer from any municipal police service, EPS, CPS, RCMP out there, and they're going to tell you the same thing. The rules are there to do their job. They have the tools that they need. It's the judicial system that is failing Canadians.
So what's next now? Because you're going to be heading back to Alberta, like I am. Mm-hmm. What do you do next? Is it continue the advocacy, hope FCM gets the message that oil and gas will be on the table? What do you want to see next happen? And what do you take away to make sure that what you spoke about today doesn't fall on deaf ears?
Exactly that. The conversations need to keep happening. We got to keep pushing the needle. The emails, the phone calls. We've invited out. FCM did come out. They were out in our offices actually just before this convention. We need to see more of that. We need to have more of those touch points. We got to be clear and concise with what we're asking for and what work they're doing and what they're doing to help us. And I always say, I sound a little grouchy sometimes, a little grumpy, but, I'm actually an incredibly nice person, very, very reasonable. And I'm very open to keep having those conversations. And I want to sit at that table. But at the same time, I'm not a pushover either. So included in those conversations are going to be constructive and respectful conversations about making sure that we are actually going to make some true changes and move forward and actually do some of the things that we're talking about. And talk is cheap some of these days, but I've said it a few times here today. But I think you know me, and I think the residents in my area and the members and RMA know that I don't go down, and I don't go down easily. And I will continue to push. I will continue to carry the message and have those conversations. And I'm not afraid, and I will not be backing down.
President Westerlund, always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure. So thank you, and thank you to your viewers and your listeners too.
From the North, Association of Yukon Communities President Lauren Hanchar joined us to talk about the Yukon presidents at the convention and what next steps look like for municipalities across the territory. President Hanchar, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting about the AYC at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Got to start simple. What brings you here to the FCM this week?
What brings me to FCM is the fact that FCM is essentially a giant AYC. Well, AYC is obviously at the Yukon level, FCM is at the national level. It's important for us to participate in FCM because we barely have the capacity to lobby the Yukon government, never mind the federal government as well. And FCM does such an effective job of lobbying the federal government on behalf of all municipalities in Canada. And just happy to be a part of that.
One of the big things that a lot of people enjoy about these conventions, and even up in Haines Junction when I was there, was the networking, the connecting with fellow municipal leaders from across Canada or across the Yukon. One of the things that I often hear is the great thing about those networking moments is hearing about the common challenges. What's the same thing that's going on in Watson Lake that isn't going on in Montreal, that's going on in Charlottetown? What are the things that you're hearing that are similar to what's going on in the Yukon at this convention?
The things that I'm hearing are the fear around, well, maybe not fear, maybe that's not the right word, but the concern with the amount of infrastructure dollars being invested in the North specifically, but that's certainly a concern for, I would say, all municipalities across the country.
One of the big things that I also hear is housing. You talk about infrastructure, which is great, but also mental health and addiction.
Yes.
Mental health and addiction was talked about a lot in Haines Junction, especially even around crime as well. What do you take back from this convention to ensure that the conversations that started here don't just end here the moment you walk on that plane to head back to the Watson Lake?
Yeah, so we obviously are going to report back to the board. We had quite a few really good productive meetings here, as well as like a lot of good programming put on by FCM. There are 10 people here from the Yukon, so 10 of us to be able to go back to, I think, 3-4 different councils to hopefully put some of the stuff learned here to good use.
And my final question, and it's an important one, and it's a political one, but you're a political officer, so I got to ask it. What is the benefit for AYC to be part of an organization like the Federation of Canadian Municipalities?
Kind of like what I said earlier, where we have this organization that's very similar to what we are, but on such a bigger scale, and that is so well equipped and connected to be able to lobby really effectively on behalf of everybody at the same time for issues of mutual concern, I guess, for...
Awesome. President Hanchar, I want to thank you so much for first off, inviting me up to Haines Junction. It was greatly appreciated. But B, inviting me back to Watson Lake.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to visiting your own community, and I'm looking forward to being there in person in 2026. So thank you so much for sitting down with me here and when we get up to Watson Lake.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
And finally, we close with one of the major highlights of the week, the acclamation of Vancouver City Councillor Rebecca Bligh as the new president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We spoke with President Bligh on the final day of the convention to discuss her plans for the year ahead and how FCM continues to serve municipalities from coast to coast to coast.
President Bligh, thank you so much for sitting down with me on the very last day of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in beautiful downtown Ottawa, Ontario. First off, you've been here for the last 4 days. You've been crisscrossing for the last 10 months. How has this culminated into this weekend? How are you feeling?
Oh, it has been a wonderful weekend. As always, as you say, we visit people in their home communities, and then to have everybody together in one place here in beautiful Ottawa has just been wonderful to see. We've had a very lively few days with workshops and plenaries, study tours, all on the topics of municipal government. Of course, we started the first day with meeting with all the new ministers, or not all, but the particularly impactful ministers to municipal issues and priorities. And then, of course, the Prime Minister taking time to address our entire membership who was here. So that was wonderful.
I want to pick up on that just for a second, if you don't mind. You had the pleasure to sit down face to face with him on that stage, and all the delegates were hoping to hear something, and I think they did hear something about that renewed federal municipal relation, about having you guys as a strong partner. Are you optimistic about the future with what Prime Minister Carney has said on the stage?
Yes, I think that the Prime Minister brought a real sense of real talk and pragmatism. And so that's what we need, because that's what municipal leaders do. We don't speak high level and in the ether. We talk about on the ground and in the ground issues that are required to be city building and in community building. And I think that the Prime Minister really got that, especially being here at our annual conference at a time when decisions and programs are being developed, budgets are being put together, to really see that municipalities came out in force through the vehicle of FCM to advocate for themselves and their own home communities. And so there was just, I think, a moment of synergy in that moment where both they got to hear from the Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister got to really get a sense of what FCM's all about and how strong we are together.
A few of the key takeaways that I've noticed over the last 3 days of doing interviews with delegates is housing, infrastructure, bail reform, mental health, and addiction. Those are the key themes I'm hearing over and over again. As president, you've crisscrossed Canada. Are those the key topics that you're hearing that impact every single municipality, whether they are a major metropolitan like Vancouver or Toronto, or to the smallest community of Kyle, Saskatchewan?
Absolutely. Housing, affordable housing, which also helps tackle some of those other issues related to mental health addiction. Folks need stability. They need housing stability if they're going through treatment programs. Folks who are going through rehabilitation programs through a public safety lens also need stability in housing. So the fact that the federal government is finally back in the housing game in terms of below market units of housing, which we would call that in a Vancouver context where it's extremely unaffordable, on all measures related to housing affordability and availability. The fact that the federal government's back in the housing game to build affordable housing, I think, is music to our ears here at FCM. I've been with the organization for 8 years. I've been elected for 8 years. We have not seen enough housing being prioritized at the level that folks can afford. We're talking about the workers, we're talking about frontline responders, the teachers, the nurses, those that really hold up our communities. And so, I think that the housing piece and then the infrastructure that's needed to allow that housing to be built so that a toilet flushes, so that things work, and also infrastructure that is specific to rural. We announced our rural component yesterday. We're advocating for a specific rural infrastructure fund. And why that's important, and we really did get this through to the Prime Minister, I believe, is that we can have nation-building projects, but if once those trucks leave the ports with all those goods and products, if they can't get through our roads and our bridges without hitting a bottleneck, then we've missed a massive step in being able to build that national prosperity and economic development that's going to benefit all Canadians. So I think we've really hit the mark on some of those pieces where infrastructure links to economy, housing links to mental health and addictions, and that public safety, both on the RCMP staffing side, the funding side, also is going to impact that issue of repeat offenders and bail reform as well, by addressing sort of the chronic offenders while being able to actually support folks getting back into stability. So as you can hear, everything is connected that we do at the municipal level. Everything has a thread into something else, and that's what municipal leaders bring to the table when speaking to different orders of government, provincial and federal.
You talk about the rural report that was released with yourself and Neil Como, the chair of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Rural Forum, if I'm doing that right. There seems to be a big push for rural topics at this year's convention. Why was that important? Because traditionally you wouldn't think Ottawa is the place to talk about rural communities, but it seems that at the Federation wanted to talk about rural communities this time. Why was that important for yourself and for the organization?
You know, I think there's always been a lens on rural, but perhaps not done in a way that really lifted up the voices of our rural members. We've always known it's important internally, but it's about what we project out as well. And a real focus at this time when economic development across the country is critical, and that can't just happen in our urban centers. We need to recognize that agricultural land, energy, moving goods and services, warehousing has to happen where we have a lot of land mass, and that happens in rural. Absolutely contributes to the national prosperity picture that we recognize our country is at a pivotal time to meet that moment and build, as the Prime Minister says, build, baby, build, and we're all for that, but we can't do that if we don't invest in rural, because that is really where where the rubber hits the road in terms of resource communities, and they have smaller populations there in rural Canada, so we can't simply just rely on property tax to put that infrastructure in place that's needed to make sure that the services are where they need to be for communities, and that housing is there for workers as we grow our country in a sustainable way, which means all size communities right across coast to coast to coast.
I want to talk about the future a little bit, if you don't mind, before I let you go. And you are losing Scott Pearce, but gaining Mark Dorval. Doré. Sorry, I apologize. I just had him on.
He was so Mark Doré is the mayor of Dorval. So there we go.
I knew I'd get that right. Are you excited about the future with this new board? I know it's some similar faces, but you're adding Mark the mayor onto the board, or the table officers, I should say. Are you excited about what the future of FCM looks like under the new leadership of you as full president now? I'm not sure if you were interim or sort of president, but are you excited about the future, what happens next year?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Scott Pearce has been a force at FCM. We wish him very well. He's retiring from municipal politics after I don't know how many decades. We'll miss him, but I know he's happy. He's going to put up that gone fishing sign and really mean it this time. So we wish him well and thank him for his many years of service to FCM. And looking at the current table officer and also the expanded executive from that, I'm very optimistic. I'm very excited. We have a hardworking team. We work together very in a very unified way. We're all different, so we bring different lived experience and qualities to the table as table officers. But I also know that I can call on any of my table officers now to show up in members' communities, to do what they can. We've got each other's backs. Some of them are dealing with real emergencies in their home communities this weekend in Manitoba. Kathy Valentino, our second VP officially now. So yes, and we welcome Mayor Mark Doré as third VP, and I know he'll represent Quebec very well, the Quebec caucus, and I look forward to getting to know him better and working through this year's very ambitious advocacy agenda as we continue to build on the relationships that we started here this week with the new Prime Minister and Cabinet.
What's the advice that you give to delegates as they begin to head home? Because there's the tendency when you go to a convention that, okay, you get home and everything that you learned is just going to sit on the shelf. How do you ensure that the advocacy work that happened here, the networking that happened here as president goes on to ensure that you're not starting fresh in Edmonton in 2026?
Think of those first, 3 folks that come to mind that you met at conference. text them, stay in touch with them, get on their social media, find ways to stay connected. Even if it's just a couple of the hundreds of people you've met, those relationships go far. They in my experience, are folks I continue to call on as a municipal leader. Learning from one another, that networking, as you say, is a critically important part. And this really is an opportunity for professional and personal development as local leaders. We're often tasked with so many different jobs. We are the jack of all trades when it comes to growing communities. And so having that sort of anchor to bounce ideas off of or just tell someone about your day is critically important, as well as continue to lean in to the FCM work, off cycle, if you will, between conferences. We have tremendous amount of tools to help smaller, larger communities make sure that they have the information they need, the data that they need to represent their communities well, and also to continue to push with their local MPs on what are some of those issues that we're carrying forward into the coming year. So I think at the end of the day, I know we're all busy, but FCM's here to support you. And any opportunity to lean in, put your hand up, let us know what you're up to and how we can connect with you and your community. That's what this next year is all about.
Final question, and it's kind of a political one, but as president, you should be prepared for it. What is the benefit of a membership with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that municipalities wouldn't get by just doing the advocacy work by themselves?
It's the theme of our conference this year. We're stronger together. And the reality is that we live in a massive country with very, very different challenges from coast to coast to coast. FCM is an incredible way for all of those different priorities and perspectives to be funneled into a united voice. And in that united voice, we have a much greater chance of connecting with the federal government on our advocacy priorities, the Housing Accelerator Fund, the Canada Community Building Fund, the Green Municipal Fund, and all the other funds and the things that we do, the Infrastructure Bank. We can advocate to CMHC. We're connecting with ministers. And what we know, and we saw that with the U.S. trade crisis this year, is that things are going to happen that we have not forecasted and planned for. So the benefit of being linked into FCM is the ability for FCM to be able to respond real time to an unanticipated urgency or crisis and already have that membership and that relationship with FCM so that you have that voice at that table when we are advocating and showing up and have that seat at the table as a very, very significant level of government in the big picture of all orders of government to be building this country for Canadians. So we're here for our members, and so we hope that members see that the value is there for them too.
President Bligh, always a pleasure to sit down and chat with you. I feel like this is the first of many conversations over the next year. Again,
yes.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you for being here, Chris.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Municipal Affairs, which was only made possible by you, our generous supporters of the Cross Border Network. Your continued support and financial backing of this show makes episodes like today's possible. If you want to join the growing list of supporters, head over to the crossborderinterviews.ca website and support the show today. To stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, and follow us on social media. For even more content and to learn more about the stories and the people we feature on this show and our sister shows, visit us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Again, your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and help us keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs soon. Till then.